From the formless void, God speaks life into existence. Order emerges from the chaos of nothingness. But order is not the final word. Life as it stands is both structured and wild, tame and untamable, both earth and spirit. Whilst God is constantly at work bringing meaning to the frenetic and disparate parts of life, there is something undeniably wild about this life we are called into. Life is order, but life is also chaos. It is between the two that we find our place.
God's big story starts dramatically. The Bible's opening words announce that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We're told that the earth was formless and empty, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. It's a mysterious portrait, but one pregnant with possibility. And you know at once something is going to happen. From the chaos, a meaningful order will be shaped. There are three separations: light from darkness, water from sky, and earth from sea. Each are then filled. Sun and stars, fish and birds, animals and humans all appear on the scene. Out of the chaos, there is a wonderfully creative new order, all in 6 world-shaping moves. God looks at it and says, "It is good." Actually, when looking at the humans, the exclamation is louder. They are very good. This is a story which starts so positively. It's a story of purpose and design. There's nothing accidental about it. It's a story of creativity, intentionality, and inclusion. It is the story of God and is the story that helps us make sense of our own story. It is the story we both tell and live out in our schools day after day. Without this story, we're simply drifting, not knowing where we've come from, why we're here, or where we're going. It's important to recognise that in the dance between chaos and order, there's a tension, a warning. Too much chaos throws our world and our souls into disarray. Too much order breeds complacency and sometimes corruption. Holding the two in balance, learning to extract the gifts in each is our goal. With order can come great strength, security, and balance. And with some chaos, we're able to see the possibility for endless creativity. As educators, our job is to harness the divine power of both as we invite our students to become creators themselves.
Every day, our students come to school, into their classrooms and playgrounds, bringing with them a combination of both chaos and order. Like all of us, they bring their lives with them, their worldview and their personality, their hopes and fears, confidence and insecurities, their joy and sadness, all underpinned by their age, maturity, and their ability to make sense of the world they live in. As educators, it's easy to look at a child and assume that we know both what's going on in their world, as well as what might be best for their future. But this isn't always true. Many years ago, working in a public school setting, I had a student move up into my grade 5-6 class who had been part of the school for the last year. He came from a very transient and dysfunctional background, often missing school, resulting in his reading and writing ability being equivalent to that of a Year 1 child. He smelt strongly of cigarette smoke and other interesting concoctions, and was bullied for being extremely soft-spoken due to a problem with his voice. As a result, he was very socially disconnected from the other students. I sized up his situation and worked out a plan to bolster his self-confidence because of his voice and support him to improve his academic abilities. I also worked with the boys in my class, developing their sense of understanding and empathy. I saw small changes. For one, he was turning up to school. This was a win. But something still wasn't balancing out, so I paid closer attention to how he was progressing in other areas. And this is where I observed that he rarely had lunch, didn't bring fruit or a water bottle. In fact, he didn't even own a school bag. Noticing him in the yard alone one day, I invited him to join me as I walked around, inquiring into how he was doing. This became our weekly chat time. One day as he joined me on duty, he excitedly told me that he and his mum were moving into a new flat. As I queried further, he soon opened up and shared that he and his mother were actually homeless. They had lived for the last year in shelters and people's garages. My heart sank into my shoes. Here I was, assuming that his reluctance to engage in learning was solely due to what I had seen on the surface, his voice and his academic skills being low. Yet there was so much more going on in this young boy's world that we had all missed. My carefully thought out lesson plans were not going to help here. I didn't have the opportunity to speak of Jesus to this boy in my class, as per the rules of a public school setting. Yet how precious it was to be able to be Jesus-like for him in that moment. He knew my beliefs and background. He knew I was a churchy and would be praying for him and his mum. Sometimes that's all the opportunity we have. Yet what an honour this role presents, to be able to speak life and hope into the chaotic situations our students face. I have students walking through loss and grief, dealing with terminal illnesses of parents, eating disorders, identity struggles. We have the ability to recognise chaos and order in their journey and can play a very special part in their story of flourishing. We cannot underestimate the reality that for many students, the story of school can simply be another day of relentless comparisons and failures, both socially and academically. Constant reminders and reinforcement of their own inadequacies and insecurities that give rise to fear and anger and a sense of hopelessness for their future. But it doesn't need to be like this, and often the difference is us. Parker Palmer once said that the best thing about being a teacher is that it matters. But the hardest thing about being a teacher is that it matters every day.
How do you, as an educator, respond to the chaos and order that your students bring with them? Are you compassionate, adding to their sense of well-being in the way you connect with them, welcoming them into classrooms and playgrounds that are safe and inviting spaces for them to grow, learn and flourish? Are you curious, seeking first to understand the cause of chaos in your students' lives? Do you try to lessen its impact when it stops them from flourishing? Are you creative, using multiple strategies to enable each student to engage with learning and the curriculum in ways that evoke excitement and success? Educators teach out of who they are and naturally bring their own personalities and preferred teaching and learning styles to the classroom. At any given time, they can be places of apparent chaos, noisy and active, or apparent order, quiet and constrained. But do we endeavour to understand what our students actually experience in our classrooms and whether it helps or hinders their learning? Do we consider the student who lives every day with a learning difficulty, or who goes home every night to a volatile family situation? The student who sits quietly, unnoticed by peers or teachers? Do we understand the dynamics of our classrooms and the intricate and interdependent web of relationships and personalities that contribute to a school's community and culture? These are important questions that require our consideration and prayerful reflection. Our task is to help students find a sense of wonder in the midst of chaos, order in the maelstrom of uncertainty, and hope in the midst of despair. so that the chaos of their world doesn't overwhelm them. It may also be, however, that we invite them to take risks, to try new things, to spark new ideas and imagination, and unsettle the equilibrium a little so that their raw creativity can take root. I used to start every school year with an activity framed around the theme of Imago Dei, the idea that each one of us are image bearers, designed as God's unique poema, His masterpiece. I would remind them that the chaos and unkindness of life often results in others attaching hurtful and bruising names to us, names that redefine us as so much less than image bearers. These labels stick with us, limit us, and discourage us. We carry the burdens of these words like a millstone around our hearts. I would then ask them to write some of these words that they had been labelled in the past. Words of pain, of hurt, of shame, of death. I reminded them that God does not label them, that labels are for jars, not people, that these words have no place in the hope and expectation of a new school year. Each student would then place their labels into a large jar that was simply labelled poison, do not touch. And we made a vow in this class, in this year, that none of the labels in this jar would ever be used. This simple activity was always so powerful and transformative for every student, and brought order and hope out of the despair these words of death had inflicted. Life is order, and life is also chaos. It is between the two, in the transformative work of grace and redemption, that we find our place and our purpose within our school communities.
So how does God's big story impact our curriculum and our teaching? Whilst this will vary from subject to subject and according to the age and ability of our students, the key concept when it comes to creation is that God has a purpose. Whilst chaos and order are inherent parts of life, ultimately everything moves in the direction of God's design and purpose for humanity and the world. The idea of purpose is important for our curriculum because it helps students to make sense of what they are learning. Specific subjects move from being individual disciplines to being held together by the purpose of God. Christian curriculum is teleological, which means that it moves towards something. This is one of the defining characteristics of Christian schooling, that everything is connected to God's plan for the world, and the biggest questions of life get wrestled with along the way. Practically speaking, we might choose to do this by helping students understand the way in which God brings order to the apparent chaos of life. We could talk to them about the history of governments, from ancient civilizations to the empires of Rome, to modern Western democracies, showing them how humans are constantly trying to bring order from social chaos, and that when we do this in partnership with God, the purpose is that we might reflect the kingdom designed for the world. We might turn to nature and the natural world and immerse our students in the wonder of ecological order, showing them how, at the same time, nature is meticulously ordered and inherently wild. It has intricate and structured mathematical patterns and unpredictable yet dynamic ecosystems. It has a food chain that requires everything to work as it should, but that very ordered system is also brutal and violent, chaotic. But it works. It has purpose. It is a part of God's telos, God's design. Search your teaching area for examples of God's purpose at work. We need students to not only catch your passion for the subject, but also to know God's purpose discovered in the creation story, to see how both the chaotic and ordered parts of life fit together within God's greater plan. Sometimes God's purposes are easy to see, and sometimes darkness seems to triumph. Both are part of our lives, and we want our students to be attuned to these realities. Giving students of all ages concrete examples of a life bound together in the purposes of God helps them to build their own lives on solid biblical foundations, whilst being prepared for the wildness to be found in the journey ahead.